ask our guests how you got into software technology. What's your origin story?
Sure. Yeah, I am a senior software engineer at Simply Wall Street. How it all started, I think it was around 2000, 2001, back in Kathmandu, in the primitive days of dial-up internet. People didn't used to have email address, but then I used to have websites, so yeah, started.
Turn right towards Stanford, then turn right.
Email address, but then I used to have websites, so yeah, started around that with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript of that era. Basically, it progressed with the formal studies to doing C, C++, Java, and these things academically, and yeah, then I moved into a lot of PHP, Node, JavaScript when I started working like formally, professionally.
Mm-hmm. And you have moved countries for jobs, is that correct?
Yes, so yeah, I have been working for 15 plus years now across 3 continents. So I am originally from Nepal, so I worked in Nepal for a couple of years. Then I was in the Netherlands for a year. Didn't really work there, but I had a small internship as part of my master's. I was in Dubai for 6.5 years, and yeah, I've been in Australia now for almost 6 years. Yeah.
Okay, that's impressive. So let's talk backend. You've obviously worked backend for a while, and I remember the first time I heard about a backend language was PHP, and you would write in your JavaScript, write in your HTML. Obviously, that's not how we do things right now. What's the shift been like to watch, and what is the sort of primary backend tool right now?
Yeah, so to kind of summarize it, I started working around 2007-8, and at that time there was no concept of this backend and front end, and then like front end APIs calling backends. So PHP was the thing most people use, and I also used it. And we had everything inside the same PHP file or the same template that we used to call. So that's how things started. And I guess around 2013, 14, the idea of SOA and microservices and splitting stuff into backend and front end started coming in, and that's where I think a clear demarcation of okay, backend engineers do backend languages, databases, data stores and stuff, and then front end people, you guys do JavaScript, and then you have many frameworks like Angular, React and stuff, and then you create a bridge between them, which is an API, which is generally a JSON API over REST, and then that's how things kind of started. For me, yeah, I did PHP like probably from 2008 to 2015, 14, 15 across 2 countries. And I think towards 15, 16, as I said, the idea of bringing stuff, microservices happened, and then I gradually moved into writing JavaScript at the backend, which is Node, vanilla Node to start with. So I think 18, 19, then I started doing more of the TypeScript thing with Nest.js, and the past 3 companies, which have been scale-ups and startups, yeah, I've been doing Node, but then the common thing with all of them is all of them have their older apps in PHP, and everything that's written new is basically written in Nest and TypeScript and
yeah, I see some modern backends just operating as full old school software, Java, Go, Scala, whatever, running on a server somewhere, talking to whatever front end code. Why do you think that shift happened from having PHP, where it's sort of part of what you write on the front end, to having a pretty elaborate system in the back?
I think the main shift is how interactive you want your application to be, and what things do you want to change when users interact. For example, for the things that you mentioned, I guess Rails is also a full stack app. You just have to have everything in Ruby, and the whole template is just painted and served by the server. There's unless you add extra JavaScript to it, there isn't default any extra JavaScript. But then once you started having interactivity, once you need some parts of the page to be updated differently than the other parts of the page, so that's where I think this extra interactivity and this need of either actually being faster or seeming to be faster for the user, all of these things came into play, and then that's where the split really started to happen, where backend engineers would give you JSON, and then front-end engineers would consume JSON in the not the language but the framework of their choice.
Yeah, because I remember one of my first forays in JavaScript was just like hiding and exposing pieces of a page, and if you serve that whole page all at once, that is just a bear. That's just a lot of code to dump on somebody's system.
Yeah.
Do you think any of the heavier frameworks have contributed to this, or are they also trying to solve the same problem?
I think if we oversimplify the problem, it's basically adding and removing elements from a page. That's what all of the JavaScript frameworks are doing. And even in early 2000s, I think we used to call it Ajax or something of that sort. And then if it's past like XML and then get XML back, which also kind of did the same thing. You just want to update one part of the page or basically add or remove elements out of page. And then jQuery was almost synonymous to JavaScript at one point. And yeah, I think like towards the beginning of 10, 12, Angular was something that came into the picture, which was dubbed the jQuery killer at that point. And then probably in a couple of years, 13, 14, Angular also lost its light by React taking over the spotlight. So as I said, it's basically trying to add and remove elements from a page, and all of them or most of them do the same thing. Some of the frameworks have more of a JavaScript tilt where they say write everything in JavaScript and then we'll do it. Some of them try to do two-way data binding. For example, I don't know, probably Angular still does that. For example, flavors of coffee, but everything is still coffee, and then everything is still trying to remove and add elements on the fly without trying to refresh the page. Probably get smaller stuff from the server, hopefully in JSON, and then repaint it. That's what I believe most of the JavaScript frameworks do at the core.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to simplify it. But I think the back-end stuff, the responsibilities of the back-end engineer are, broadening to include the infrastructure it runs on, right? Like the infrastructure is getting so complicated that you have to think about where your back-end pieces are located on some like worldwide data center system. Do you think that's a good thing, having to think about the infrastructure, or is this just a pain?
I think it is a good thing to have, because if you think of how you learn and how you do things, learning things adjacent to your main depth is, I think, a very good thing. By that I mean, if you are a backend engineer and you want to know about infrastructure, good thing. If you are a front-end engineer, you want to know more about web performance, for example, very good thing, right? So things like that, I think, kind of go hand in hand. So it's good that you learn. But then I think there is also an evolution of things. For example, early 2000s or mid 2000s, there were actual roles like database administrators, which probably now have gone only to the big three clouds who actually manage all of our databases these days, right? So with that, there is a level of specialization, as well as there is some level of generalization that you still need to do. As a backend engineer, I think it's a very good idea to know, learn, and understand what's happening in the background. For example, basically the whole DevOps movement is both backend and ops teams work together. There is no throwing stuff over the wall, and then you focus on testing, deliverability, velocity, some of the shift left things, and then you have things like logging and monitoring to support that. And plus there is a very good focus on communication and collaboration. That means if you are a software engineer and your code eventually runs on Kubernetes and you don't know anything about Kubernetes, and then there is a bug, then it will be a bit difficult for you to try to figure out what's happening. Whereas even if you know some of the Kubernetes, some of the terms, some of how it works, why is it declarative, I think it will be a lot easier whenever there is an issue or anything that you want to debug, to go in and then figure things out, even if you don't have full access to Kubernetes, but at least you kind of guess, okay, this is happening here. Because at times, debugging is a lot of guessing and removing other things that cannot happen. So I think that's a good thing to learn.
Yeah, it's harder to set those debug breakpoints when the software is just distributed everywhere.
Exactly.
So does that mean you support back engineers being on the incident response, on the on-call shifts?
That's a good one. So I mean, I have had multiple experiences of this. When I was back in Dubai at Namshi, we used to have an on-call roster, and I was there for at least a couple of times, if I remember, because when I left it there, we were just starting it. The philosophy behind that, I think, is you build it, you run it. So you